Discover the amazing, clinically proven health benefits of original Tahitian noni. Original Tahitian noni includes powerful antioxidants, adaptogens, nutrients, and phytonutrients to naturally boost energy levels, immune system function, and overall health. Meticulously sourced from French Polynesia, this is the original superfruit. Accept no imitations. Original Tahitian noni. Visit ATR Health at alchemicaltechrevolution.com. and click on the Shop Here tab for more details.
But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
Let's talk to our next guest. He is, of course, the man that you can find on Rockfin, digging so deep into the esoteric and the occult symbology of things, the events, the symbols on packages, the stories, the movies. He is Wayne McRoy. Wayne, great to see you again, man. How you doing?
Doing good, Gard. Glad to be speaking to you again here. Evil Spock
Hey,
approved.
yes. I'll give you the old Vulcan symbol thing, which I guess is like an old Jewish thing. I don't know, but I guess Leonard Nimoy like opened his eyes at some Jewish ceremony. You saw some of the guys doing that. Thanks for joining us, man. And the subject for tonight is a fascinating one, but your show is always so fascinating. Tell people where they can find you.
Well, I just set up a brand new website, so everything's all centralized from there now. So it's www.alchemicaltechrevolution.com. So that should make it nice and easy for people to find me. So
Well, I'm going to go searching for that right now. www.alchemicaltech.com. Let me see if I typed it right. I'm pretty bad. Hey. Oh, mate, I don't think I did it right.
No, it's alchemicaltechrevolution.com.
Oh, because I'm an idiot. There you go.
Oops.
Okay.
Yeah, it's up there. I have all the latest podcast episodes and everything are up on there. Links for.
Oh, wow. This is gorgeous. Holy moly. Look at this thing. Wow, dude.
Yeah.
Boy, you really went to town.
Yeah, it's been in the works for quite a while, so I have it all set up and good to go now, and I have links to everything there. So it's all good. So people could find my work there, and I do talk about the esoteric and the occult quite a bit because there's so much of that goes on in our world that gets overlooked by people.
Well, what I like also is you're able to blend the breaking stories, the news stories in with such a depth of history that And, I've been in multiple people conversations with you, Billy Ray, Tony, and all the guys. And you come in with such stuff and you see things that the only other person I've seen who can do this is the esoteric detective Ed from New Zealand. And he's the guy who you're probably familiar with how he looked at the Pope's conference hall and realized it looked like a snake, both on the interior and exterior. And that got him a ton of traction on YouTube.
Right, I'm familiar with that. I never heard of him actually, though, so that's something I'll have to check out his work.
Yeah, he's still on YouTube, amazingly. He's got the Outer Light, and he also used to do the Outer Dark, and that's where he got a lot of traction with that video. And then he sort of went away for a little while, and he's back, and he's in New Zealand, and he just goes crazy with all the jab stuff and all that stuff. He's gone very, very underground. Like, he uses as untraceable tech as possible and stuff like that. Your website, alchemicaltechrevolution.com, Wayne. Awesome. How long you been doing this, by the way, putting this information on the internet?
Well, I've actually, even though I've been researching these topics for a good part of my adult life now, I'm going on 20 some years of really deep research into a lot of this stuff. But publicly, I never really came out with anything public until 2017. It's when I published my first book and didn't start doing podcasting or anything of the sort until more recently than that. And honestly, I've only been doing this full time for a little under 2 years now. So it's really a lifetime's worth of research and putting it all together here. So yeah, there's the links to my books.
Yeah.
So that's another
The
thing.
Demic of Pan, Breaking the Natural Order, The Alchemical Tech Revolution, Cybernetic Messiah, Autism Epidemic, and Autism AI and the Singularity. Oh, this is great. I hope we get some folks to check you out. And it's MCROY. And of course, as we mentioned, they can head over to your new awesome website, Alchemical Tech Revolution. And you're also on Rockfin. And if
Right.
people are interested and they like what you're doing, they can hit you up, drop you a tip, some cash donation, that sort of thing as well.
Absolutely. It's always much appreciated if they do so. They can find me on Rockfin, or I'm on Spotify or all the podcast platforms now, too.
Awesome. And I know you have paid subscriber capacity at your website, I see, right?
Yeah, people could go over there, and actually it's hosted through Spotify, so that's where they would be paying for the subscription links to, is through Spotify. So that's all set up and good to go, and
Cool.
you can subscribe there. And I have, how I actually work this is, I have a free episode I publish every week, and then there's also a paid member episode that goes up every week. And I've also been running bonus episodes of my Alchemical Lantern live show that I do usually on Friday nights. Now that's going to be launching exclusive with Free World FM coming up very soon too.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. Billy
So
Ray's
that's
been working so hard on that.
yeah,
That's
it's been a long time in the works, and they've encountered some different holdups along the way, but we're just about there, and I think we'll be launching within the next couple weeks now with
That's
that.
going to be good. Hey, so Wayne, I come at this as a person who's always enjoyed Halloween as a kid, whether it was the Great Pumpkin Charlie Brown or getting dressed up, telling spooky stories and stuff. And then as I got older, I sort of, lost interest in Halloween and things. Then you start to hear about occultic roots of Halloween. You kind of heard about that as a kid. You said, oh, maybe some of the stuff I was scared about as a kid really actually has some ties to real things in history. I remember when I was a kid, I used to enjoy listening to Night on Bald Mountain, that sort of thing, Can you tell us where there are some things to keep in mind about Halloween as far as its occultic roots, its esoteric roots, and things we might be seeing nowadays, the date, the symbology, that sort of stuff for folks?
Oh, absolutely. There's a rich history to what we celebrate as Halloween now. And of course, it's known as All Hallows Eve. And this was actually a holiday set up by the Christian church. I think it was sometime in the 16th century, I want to say, where they moved a celebration called All Saints' Day from May 1st to November 1st. And there's connections there that go back into the occult as well, and into the earlier mystery schools and a lot of the pagan religious ceremonial things that occur, because May 1st is a high holiday for many pagans that's known as Beltane. And of course, we have November 1st and of course October 31st, Halloween, how we see it today, which was the eve of All Saints' Day in the old Catholic Church. Well, we have this celebration going from the evening, going from October 31st into November 1st, that correlated back to a Celtic holiday called Samhain, and it's spelled like Samhain, Samhain. It's pronounced Samhain, though. And that's an interesting thing. And that goes back to Celtic and Scottish language. And there's a whole mythology that goes along with this. So these are the origins of where our modern Halloween holiday come from. And it's got some dark undertones to it if you want to go down that rabbit hole here.
Well, if you want to pick up any of those threads, go for it. And I'll just tell you, Wayne, Sam Hain, as the people would call it in the publishing industry and so on, Samhain Publishing was the company that offered me a contract for one of my novels. And I declined the contract because they wanted me to split my public political work from my writing name. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that. Why would I do that? And so I disconnected from them. And so I'm familiar with the terminology. I did a little research, and I knew people had told me beforehand. So I'm glad I didn't connect with them.
Yeah. So, well, basically, Sam Hain, Samhain, the word Samhain, its derivative, the etymology of it, it simply means summer's end. So this was actually the New Year's celebration for the Celtic people. November 1st, they celebrated as the New Year, and this was going into what they called the dark season or the dark time. And in celebration thereof, they had some ritualistic type things that they had done at that point, because during this time, when we're going back, there was a king there named King Tigernmus, who wound up making offerings to a god called Crom Cruach in the old Celtic traditions here. So this Crom Cruach basically was a fertility and sun god, if you want to look at it from what our modern perspective would say, what the mainstream history community would say about it.
Wayne, if I could, would these be considered druidic rituals or just Celtic, traditional Irish Celtic rituals? And in some cases, there were Celtic peoples even in the Midlands up to northern England.
Right. Well, this crossed the bounds of Ireland, Scotland, all of the northern regions there, and it did permeate into the larger culture, but it did start as druidic rites. So they had this god that they venerated called Crom Cruach, and every Samhain, that would be Halloween, they would sacrifice one of the firstborn children of the community to this god by bashing their head against a stone idol of the god. And that's where we actually get this notion of the jack-o'-lantern from, because these families who would sacrifice their firstborn children to this god for a fair harvest in the upcoming year, they would carve out, originally it was a turnip, they would carve out a face on a turnip and make a lantern out of it. And this is where the jack-o'-lantern symbol comes from. And that's why we carve pumpkins today. So they would set that out on their stoop so that the spirits, the wandering spirits that serve this god Crom Cruach, would pass by their house and, give favor to their family and to their farmlands and their works during that time, because they did sacrifice their child to Crom Cruach.
Do you have any idea on when they stopped the murderous practice? I don't
Well,
know.
that's open for debate. I mean, I know that a lot of that dates back to 16th century texts and stuff where they talk about that. So I mean, it goes back a long time, and there's more explanations as to this, because during this time of year, this New Year's celebration going into the dark time, of course, this always aligns with like the solstices and equinoxes and things like that. So this was going into the fall. So this was a celebration. This is where they split off their new year in that tradition. So the new year started with the dark time, or the dark season, as they like to call it, the dark period. And they would make these sacrifices to ensure a plentiful bounty come the light times, which started on May 1st, that Beltane, the other side of that. So that was celebrating the birth of summer and the death of summer, pretty much, in their system. So they had this tradition that during this time, during this one day of Samhain and also Beltane, they say similar things about it. This is where the veil between our world and the spirit world becomes very thin. And they had a tradition that sometimes the ghosts or spirits of their dead relatives could come back to visit and offer either, some beneficial type of an energetic principle to their homes, or if they had some type of a grudge against somebody, they could seek their revenge in this way. So during this time, what the tradition was is that you had wandering spirits around. And in order to scare off or confuse these wandering spirits or to not make them recognize you, they would put on costumes or disguises or masks. And that's where we get the tradition of dressing up. So we have all of these different connections that go back to this.
Do you know whether or not, for example, if you take something like the Wicker Man or some of the symbology that Alison Goldfrapp has put forward, or some of the folk horror things where um, they would combine human elements and animal elements, a buck or an owl's head, that sort of thing, for the masks. Was that is that part of it? Would that be kind of one of the mask things, or do you have any idea what the masks would be, or is it really just any kind of mask?
Well, the whole history of the mask even goes back even further than this. There's a lot there, and that's a whole other show. Uh, but at any rate, yeah, we have essentially what the tradition holds during this Druidic type celebration or Celtic celebration, because it later became popularly celebrated throughout all the culture there. And of course, we have it still today in a transformed type of a state, but it's still basically the same things. They would put on these masks or these costumes in order to confuse the spirits so that they wouldn't recognize them. So if they had, like, say, a malevolent spirit coming back from the dead to try to harm them in some way or seek their revenge, they wouldn't recognize the person. So they would dress up this way and they would wander around, and oftentimes they would sing songs, and they would go about collecting uh, for like food and stuff like that for the Samhain celebration, for the community Samhain celebration. So they would go door to door collecting food, and that's where we get the tradition of going door to door and saying trick or treat and collecting candy. And of course, later on, it developed into this whole thing where they would pull pranks on people if they didn't make their donation to the celebration. So we have all those traditions come directly from this. And like I said, I mean, there's kind of some dark undertones to a lot of
Yeah.
it. People don't realize it. I mean, a lot of people think it's a harmless holiday. Okay, it's fun, but it crosses over with a lot of other things. It crosses over with this All Saints Day that we talked about earlier, because what that is that's a day that the Catholic Church celebrated the death of the saints. And we have like Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead celebrations. That all crosses over. It's the same basic premise where the spirits of your dead relatives from the past can actually, because the veil is thin on that day, they can actually manifest in some way. And some traditions, some people still will like set a place at the table for this dead relative or something like that. And these traditions date back to this in particular, this celebration of Samhain in particular by the Celts. And actually, you could probably trace it back further than that, because there's a lot of this that ties back to some of the old Saturnalian type doctrines and things that they did way back then. I haven't found like the direct connection to the Druids or the Celts from that, but it's got to be there somewhere. And when I find it, I'll let you know. But we have all these celebrations that derive from the same type of manifestation of spirit in certain ways. So even if it crosses time and culture, what we have now, it's kind of the same thing, a package deal together. So we celebrate this stuff not knowing the roots of it. And the roots of it are kind of dark.
Wayne, our guest, folks, is Wayne McRoy, and you can find the new website, Alchemical Tech Revolution. And of course, find Wayne under his name, Wayne McRoy, on Rockfin. And you can head over from the alchemicaltechrevolution.com website to check out all the links, the books, all these things. Absolutely fascinating stuff, Wayne. And by the way, it's great to see you. It's really good to see you, dude. I really appreciate you being here. This is,
Yeah, man. I appreciate you having me on. It's been a while. We haven't talked in a bit, and I know
yeah,
there's different reasons for that, but yeah, it's
yeah.
all good, man.
Oh, it's awesome, man. And let me ask you, when you talk about the Druidic, I remember doing some research for a book that I based in Bath, England. And as you know, the Druids were originally the ones who settled in the Bath area. They looked at the waters as being healing waters. There was this whole legend about a prince who had leprosy, went to Bath, England, and rolled around in the mud like the pigs did because he saw the pigs that were healing up in the mud, and his leprosy got cured. And then the Romans came in, and they put there was already a Druidic cultic connection. They replaced the Druidic cultic connection in Bath with their own temple to Minerva, I think. and they created the Druidic hot spas. And then when the Romans left, the British kings would go there and recreate and so on and so forth. And so I placed a story there, and I did a lot of research on the Druids, and I found out, the title is Men of the Oak, I think, for the Druids or something like that. And I'm fascinated because I know that the Druids held on to a lot of the old learning, like Euclidean geometry and things like that. Do you think that that was because of their interest in alchemical stuff, and they got interested in that as it was brought up, or were there other reasons for that? And also, if you want to attach this, did they sacrifice the children at that time because they thought that in addition to the end of the summer season going into the darkness, but it went parallel to that idea that the film between our world and the netherworld was thinnest then, and that's why they did it? I know it's a lot of questions, but whatever you want to address.
Yeah, that certainly seems to be the case. When the veil is thin, that's when these types of ceremonies or these types of things that they do in those cases, they have more efficacy according to those people who claim to know stuff about this, stuff about the occult and magic and all of these things that interconnect. And of course, we have all of these connections within the various secret society groups, and it's no different with the Druids. They were in and of themselves their own type of secret society group, and they still exist today. Just so you know, the Queen, who just passed away, when was it, a year or two ago now? I guess it's been that long already. Well, she was actually initiated into their order. I have the pictures of it. I've posted it before on Facebook and stuff like that. There's a picture of her being initiated by the Grand Druid. So we have these traditions, and a lot of them have many of these same teachings at the core. So, like Euclidean geometry and stuff like that, like you said, this all ties back to some of the ancient mystery schools, the teachings and stuff that they brought forward, the secret teachings, if you will, the secret doctrine of these various groups who claim to have hidden knowledge the rest of us don't know about, and
Yeah.
claim to use these things in certain ways. So these are core tenets to all of it, and they're all interconnected in some way. So that's why, even I said, I mean, the Druids, it's this separate type of geographical area, but yet they still have some of the same core tenets and hallmarks and teachings of other secret society groups that have emerged throughout the different parts of the world. And it ties back to this mystery school connotation being involved with it, because you had a secret priestcraft that practiced all these different mythological archetypes in different ways, had external or exoteric worship of certain gods, but behind that was the secret teachings that they had, and they all venerated the same things and did the same things. So very much of the time, the reasons that they do this kind of stuff are probably far different than what the public did this stuff for. And that's
And
the
it's
important thing to keep in mind.
Well, the same way, and it's interesting because you mentioned the exoteric and the esoteric, and there were certain periods in British history when some of those things sort of crossed. You got that guy Gardner, who was very involved in the occult at the turn of the century, involved with the royal family, the Queen. You've got Madame Blavatsky. You've got the Theosophy movement. You've got Aleister Crowley. You've got the spy rings that come off of that and then come over to the United States. You get the end of the British Empire, and it's absolutely fascinating when you think of things like, we talked about Euclidean geometry, and I mentioned maybe a week ago, I was talking about how the film Wizard of Oz, L. Frank Baum was a theosophist, and he not only had a lot of messages in there about whether they were going to have a gold standard or a silver standard in the book and so on and so forth. But if you watch the movie, you'll see at the end when the wizard gives the scarecrow his diploma, the scarecrow points at his head and he recites the Pythagorean theorem. And Pythagoras was very much into Egyptian alchemical occultism, and Plato picked up on that with his idea of the people having certain types of elements in their system, and the blood that was lead or bronze or gold, and the ideal city state being run by the philosopher kings. He was a massive fan of the Euclidean geometry and of Pythagoras, who himself had been heavily influenced by the Egyptian alchemical movement, right?
Oh yeah, all these things tie together, and you'll notice that the city in the Wizard of Oz is the Emerald City. Well, what color's the emerald? It's green, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Emeralds are green. Well, that is a cue right there. That's an esoteric sign by Frank Baum. The
It's not
green.
just because of the dollar, the green
No,
dot?
no, no.
Oh, I
There's
didn't
more.
know that.
It's the green language. That's what the Freemasons call it. It's called the language of the birds. It's the phonetic Kabbalah. It's the secret language of the elite of these secret society groups. So he's telling you in no uncertain terms, my movie, my book is loaded with symbology if you have but eyes to see. So that's what that is. It's the hidden communication system that the secret society groups use to communicate with one another. It's called the green language. Go ahead and research that if you've never looked into that, Gard. It's a fascinating subject. I've looked at this stuff for many years, and that's how I am able to pick up on a lot of this symbology and stuff that most people don't see because
Oh,
of that. If you understand that, then
jeez.
you have the codex for translating their language. So yeah, the and by the way, Oz is referring to Osiris. If you were wondering about the Egyptian connection there, that's what Oz is really referencing. So the
Mhm.
Wizard of Osiris, and of course, who was the Wizard of Osiris? If you look back, who was the practitioner of magic in Egypt that was heavily revered? Well, that's Isis. So you have the connection, the Isis, Osiris, Horus myth already being entangled there. And of course, Pythagoras was a very hugely influential figure throughout all of these secret society groups. He was one of the highest initiates, and some say he was concurrent with who is called, in some traditions, Hermes Trismegistus. So you have
So heavy hermetic thing going right through Greek philosophy right on in.
absolutely, it's all interconnected, and so much so, Pythagoras being such an important figure. Somebody a little bit closer to modern times, a Rosicrucian fellow named Dr. Reuben Swinburne Clymer, his official title within some of these occult fraternities, within the quote unquote Illuminati, and they are a real thing. He was called Pythagoras 38. That was the title he took on, Pythagoras 38. So many people are unaware of this stuff, but absolutely, the Illuminati as a group does exist. They use different names at different times, but I
This is
have
wild.
actual books that say Temple of the Illuminati on the cover, and they were written and they were in connection with the Rosicrucian Brotherhoods, various ones of the secret society groups. So they're acknowledged to exist today still.
Wayne McRoy is our guest, folks. Again, go to Alchemical Tech Revolution if you're watching this after the fact. If you're watching live, go to some live questions in just a minute if it's okay with you, Wayne. Would that be all right?
Yeah, I'm cool with that.
Great, man. Listen, I know, we use the Halloween date to be able to open up this Pandora's box in a way to look at these things. How you keep track of these things and allow for a through line when so many things run parallel and you can hop from one to the other, and yet you make it so interesting and so linear. I'm wondering, you mentioned the green thing and the green language. Um, Am I fishing when I think about the Legend of King Arthur, and was it Sir Gawain in the Green Knight? Was that because I know they just did a movie recently where they redid that, and I know that Tolkien did a retelling of the Green Knight. Was it Sir Gawain in the Green Knight?
I believe it was. That sounds familiar. Sir Gawain, the green.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll notice they always have that green connection to a lot of these things. Why do you think it's called the green movement here now too? I mean, this is certainly there's an environmental factor, of course, but you see, they use this type of subtle nuance, this use of archetype. This is something that resonates with the unconscious human mind. You don't pick up on it consciously, but it has a very real effect on your forward behaviors, on your subconscious behaviors. So these things, they utilize these principles all the time. So words have power and they have inherent meanings behind them that oftentimes people don't recognize on the surface. And this is what is the difference between exoteric and esoteric. So you
Right.
see something like that, and certainly you could pick up the nuance there, and probably Frank Baum was putting it in there with about the dollar and the gold and silver standard. All of that is interlaced with it, but that's only the exoteric version of what's being said. There's a deeper meaning behind it, and that's how a lot of these people operate. They have layers of meaning for all these different symbols, and depending upon your level of initiation into their secret brotherhoods is dependent upon how much of it you could pick up on or how much of this stuff you've studied is how much you
Mm.
can pick up on.
Boy, this is unbelievable. Let's head over to Rockfin chat, see what's hanging out there. Chris Graves is there, and let's see. I want to just see on the comments. Brian Taylor, Pythagoras triangle represents the Freemason Trinity. He says a square represents Osiris. Uh, B square. There's a B there. I'm not sure if I'm reading this right, Brian. So pardon me. Um, represents Isis. Oh, A square represents Osiris. B square represents Isis, and C square represents Horus. I've never heard that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, that's like the Holy Trinity if you go back to the Egyptian mythology there. It represents all of these different archetypes, like across the board. So depending upon what's your religious system that you use. This is why the Freemasons use this, because they could transcend different religious systems or mythological systems with it. It represents the same thing across the board in all these different traditions. So that's representative of the Trinity, essentially. If you go
Yeah.
back to the Egyptian mythos, and this is where a lot of the experts in this stuff claim that the mystery schools found their perfection in the Egyptian forum that they had, the Egyptian mythos, where all of the different archetypes were represented in pretty much almost perfect form there. So they have all of these archetypes attached here. And that's what mythological stories and stuff are all about. It's about attaching these archetypes or ideas to these stories so that we can understand them. Because sometimes a lot of the symbolism there, well, it really can't be described adequately enough with words. So that's why they use symbols and they use stories to get across a point to the human being because it resonates with us. It's something archetypal, inherent in our psyches. So that's one of these things, and that's why that triangle, the Pythagorean triangle, has been used as a symbol for that very thing for many, many thousands of years now. It's the same type of archetype at play. So they could use it in different ways to represent different things. And of course, there's that nuance and subtle meaning behind it there too. So you could
Yeah.
trace it back to that. A lot of the Freemasons and the various mystery school groups, the secret society groups, like to trace things back to the Egyptian mythology because that kind of gives them a similar base to work from. That way, they all kind of know what was going on in the Egyptian system. That's why they put such emphasis on the Egyptian mythos. That's why, out of all of the different cultural groups in the world, there's only Egyptology that has its own science. Did you ever wonder why that is?
Yeah,
Well,
that's
it's
very
because
interesting.
these mystery schools and these secret occult fraternities, they use this as a reference point for everything. And I could tell you another thing, a lot of, I shouldn't say everything, but a lot of what we've been handed by Egyptologists, well, it's not telling you the truth.
That's just where I was gonna go. You immediately got me thinking of my visits to the British Museum and the movement to get those materials out of Egypt, show certain things, hide other things. So do you think there have been a lot of forces behind what was recovered, what was shown, and the stories that were told to people about what was shown?
Well, yeah, this all ties back to who's running the place here. I like to tell people that at the very tippy top of the power structure in this world, there are dark occultists who run things. And I certainly still believe that. And I will maintain that because it's demonstrable. You see all the ways that the occult is leveraged throughout society. And there's this same small power group that's been controlling things from behind the veil for a long, long time now. And of course, they want to keep certain things hidden from the public because they view us all as the profane. That's what they call us. If you're not an initiate in their one of their secret orders, well, you're nothing. You're little more than livestock to them. And you're profane and you don't deserve to know the secrets. And they don't want you to know the secrets because their viewpoint is you're cattle to be manipulated how they see fit. If you're not initiated into one of their secret society groups, you don't even have a soul, according to some of their belief systems.
Do
So,
you I'm curious, Wayne. I have a couple questions, but the first one, okay, so I'll ask this one, just, random here. Of the two. People looking at Halloween now, is it how would you what would you like to tell those people if they've got kids, if they might be going to Halloween parties and things like that, to view regarding their own spirit, what they might be buying into, what they might be contributing to. How do you look at this as far as the metaphysical goes and what people could actually be dabbling in without even realizing it?
Well, I would just advise people go back and look at the Bible. It says, "For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual powers of wickedness in high places." So that's essentially what it is. I mean, we have this spiritual connotation attached to all of it. And whether you believe this stuff or not is irrelevant, really. Even if you think it's utter nonsense, what you need to understand is there are people in this world who very much believe in these principles and these things I'm talking about. And the things they do to act upon their beliefs in them will affect all of us. So it's important that you understand what is their motivation, what's their modus operandi, how and why do they do the things they do. And this is part and parcel of that. So even if you don't buy into the spirit realm of things, which I think if you don't, I think you need to do a little more self introspection on that part. But that's my opinion. So even if you don't buy into any of that, though, you still need to understand there's people in positions of power in this world that very much do, and they will do things acting on their beliefs that affect us all. So that's the important.
Okay, gonna hop back in and place your questions in Rockfin or Rumble for Wayne McRoy, folks. And Brian's got a couple other points here and a question, I think, over in Rockfin. After he talked about the square of A, square of B, square of C, with all of this Israel stuff going on, has Wayne looked into the Talmud? To me, it seems to be the Jewish interpretation of the mysteries. And then he has another question about Thomas Paine. We'll
Okay,
talk
well,
about Thomas Paine next.
addressing the Talmud, you have to realize the Talmud was written largely based upon Kabbalic principles, principles of Kabbalah, which is known as the Jewish mysticism in some circles. But it actually goes way deeper than that because there are different forms of Kabbalah, and most people are completely unaware of that. And of course, we're talking about Kabbalah here spelled with a K. And the spelling's important too, just for everybody out there to understand. So this is referencing back to the Kabbalah spelled with a K, which in the Hebrew means tradition. And this ties directly into the Talmud. So you do have a lot of these mystic interpretations being actually presented there in an almost exoteric type form in many ways. So this is something that most people completely miss the point on. It always ties back to these occult principles with all of this stuff. So yes, the Talmud, there is a connection there. And with all the stuff going on today in Israel, I don't claim to have all the answers to all of that. All I'm saying is just keep your eyes on the situation and don't believe what the media is telling you 100% with that
Yeah,
either.
yeah.
So
Well, Brian's next question, he says, does Thomas Paine, and these are great, Brian, awesome. Just and a great person to bring up. Does Thomas Paine have a connection to the mysteries? He seems to use the term profane a lot in his work, The Age of Reason. You have any thoughts on that?
I haven't done much investigation into Thomas Paine's background, but if he uses the word profane quite heavily, well, I would say there's probably a very good chance he has some association with some occult fraternity, and most likely the Freemasons. So let's put it that
Yeah.
way.
Interesting because Brian adds specifically Paine calls the Bible profane. If it is the Bible he calls profane, then who is his God? Because he seems to believe in a God. Is it the God of the mysteries? Interesting. So we'll leave
Well, it
that
very
open,
well
I
could
guess.
be. Yeah,
What's
it
that?
very well could be. I can't claim to know, but the God of the mysteries, well, depending upon who you listen to within the mysteries, they'll tell you this could be different forces or different things, but
Mm,
a lot of times the name Lucifer comes up at the topmost levels of these places.
the
So,
light bringer.
yep.
By the way, I want to thank Rick XRP who tipped $10 over on Rockfin. Rick, thank you. You rock, man. You rock. And if anybody has any further questions, continue, please do so. And I'm just going to go scroll down to the bottom, Wayne. You know how it goes. Now, I've got a question for you in your personal development, Wayne. You have such a depth of knowledge and breadth of knowledge, right? Was there a time that you recall when you first started to get interested in investigating these things? What drove you to this? I talked about the past, number of days, spooky stories, scary stories that inspired people. But as an adult now, I'm trying to utilize the appreciation for the scary stories to recognize that they're just stories told by people, but sometimes they can connect with us to make us realize that there's something beyond the physical. And if we walk the right path towards Christianity, then we can understand where all of the physical came from. If we wander just for the sake of titillation or because we like the spookiness, we like the themes or whatever, or we're unaware of what we're searching for, or what we're encountering as we search, we can run into some problems. What was it that inspired you? Was it a series of stories? Were you into horror stuff as a kid? Or was it an event in your life, looking at the course of history, that made you realize there's a lot connected that goes way back and these forces really exist?
Well, I've always, since I've been a young child, I've always been fascinated with the paranormal or the supernatural, especially the subject of UFOs. And that's largely where I started my research in adult life with this stuff when I started really deep diving into that. I have had some very strange paranormal encounters and experiences through the years, which kind of piqued my curiosity, but it wasn't until around 2006 or so that I really started delving very deeply into many of these subjects. And it started with the UFO phenomenon for me. It's always been something that's fascinated me. I have seen some UFOs myself in the past, and I had an encounter with one in 2006 that really sent me searching. And then, kind of doubling down on that, saw some things arise several years later with my child developing autism and all the things surrounding that that got me delving deep into the roots of the medical system and stuff like that as well. And wouldn't you know, every time you go exploring down the paths of any of these types of conspiracy type topics, you always inherently land in one of two places, and it's both. One will be in the extreme ancient antique past, where you always find the occult, and the other end of the spectrum is always in the future, the very near future, right within our reach, where you find the philosophy of transhumanism, and they interconnect. And that is largely what inspired me to start going down this path here and really doing the deep research, because I found this connection. Our modern sciences and technologies and the end game they have in mind with them, transhumanism, their roots lie back in ancient alchemy and the ancient mystery schools, in occultism, and they're interconnected in this way. And they've brought forward some of the Hermetic principles and the old antiquated, I guess you would call the old sciences. I don't see them as antiquated. They're probably more accurate than our modern science. But the old alchemical or natural sciences, you go back and you look at that. And now we're beginning to see where a lot of this jives with our knowledge base today. And a perfect example as to where you can find this tie would be with Walter Russell's work. Go and look at Walter Russell. He explains a lot of these things about modern science that don't align with what our modern theories are right now. But if you go back and you look and you see how it melds together with some of the ancient belief systems, you'll see there's a definite framework there that seems like to be more of an accurate description of things than what our modern systems would explain them as. So
Can you
we have
repeat his name for the audience one more time?
Walter Russell. Go look up
Walter
Walter
Russell.
Russell.
Wayne, I got to say, it's very interesting. We often are flooded with contemporary stories, breaking stories, and things like that. And they introduce the ideas of forces. I was talking about the thesis of, this colonization thing and how the state actually colonizes our lives. And that is in the day to day, person to person thing. But what we're also seeing here, this might be one of the most important conversations I've had in months. I just want to tell you. And I really appreciate you coming on, Wayne, because it allows us to see that while we're dealing with these day to day forces, we can see that there is a dark and very, very long history, whether it's people who are effectuated by these beliefs or it's people who are working within a system that has been molded and shaped by people with these beliefs. It is constantly attacking our free will and our soul. Am I wrong?
No, you're spot on. That's exactly what it's about. It's about collectivism, formerly known as communism on the political spectrum, but now they'll refer to it as communitarianism or collectivism or some such thing or socialism, pickenism.
Yeah.
That's what this is all about. It's about this collective mindset, this Borg mind mentality.
May I ask you, Wayne? I want to go back on the screen if I can show this to people again, because people are sitting down, they're watching on their screens. Maybe they'll take a screenshot, head over to the link now while we're chatting, or something like that. I know sometimes it can be distracting when you open up other links while there's a conversation going on, but I just want to mention over at Amazon, you got the Demic of Pan breaking the natural order, Alchemical Tech Revolution, Cybernetic Messiah, Autism Epidemic, and Autism AI and the Singularity. Would you like to pick one of those to sort of round off this conversation or describe a couple of these to your audience here as we chat?
Well, basically, the Alchemical Tech Revolution, that was my first book, which I published back in 2017. That one covers a broad spectrum of what you might call the conspiratorial type topic and gives kind of this whole notion, puts two and two together and says, hey, our modern technologies and the things that they're pursuing with our modern technologies that lead to this end of transhumanism, they have their derivation and their source back in occultism, in the occult and the magical principles. And that's what they're bringing forward. And this is the fruition of their great work. The notion or advent of transhumanism, the singularity, will be the completion of their great work. That's the fulfillment thereof. So that's
Wow.
essentially, in a nutshell, what I talk about. And I connect a lot of dots and I talk about various topics that interrelate throughout this and how it ties back to some of the old occult ideologies, things like the golem or ideas like the homunculus, and how our modern science is going there pretty much.
Um, when I think about the Golem, uh, I actually have a story that I'm working on, sort of in a C.S. Lewis sort of vein. This alternate world where someone who's been corrupted is trying to keep himself going by the sort of Golem thing. Um, it's it's the creature made from the earth. Can you describe that to people? And do you know whether or not Tolkien used that as inspiration for Gollum, or is that just I don't know?
I don't think he used it as inspiration for Gollum, the character there, but the Gollum essentially, this is like a lifeless automaton
Yeah.
that has some sort of an indwelt spirit in it that's not human. And basically, it's an emotionless type machine that will do the bidding of its master, and that's essentially what it is. So when you bring that forward to today and the notion of transhumanism, well, one of my theories that I speculate on, and this is all, I reserve the right to be totally wrong about all of this, but essentially, when I look at things through the lens of my observation and my experience, with this spiritual lens I have, the notion I see is this advent of transhumanism, or the notion of being able to merge your mind with a machine and maybe upload your consciousness to a machine and live forever. I see that as being a false notion. And what indeed is being done is it's creating a gateway to bring in some non human spirit into physical manifestation here in reality. So I see that as being the fulfillment of this golem idea, this transhumanist notion, this merging of your consciousness with the machine, because that's what the transhumanist philosophy is all about. That's what the proponents of it are talking about. Eventually, being able to transfer your consciousness into a machine and being able to live forever in some virtual world, or be able to transfer your consciousness to a new body of some sort and exist any way you see fit. And it's a lie. It's a promise that could never truly be achieved, because this bypasses the spiritual concern of things. It
Right.
looks strictly on the material world paradigm way of thinking. And that's right where they want us to be. That's what these occultists, these dark occultists that run things, this is where they want our mindset to be, focused strictly on the physical material world.
Yes.
So that's
Yes.
why our science, always seems to steer us in that direction. So they attempt to explain away consciousness, all right, consciousness itself, as nothing more than the electrochemical byproduct of your brain and brainstem. And if that's the case, if that's true, then it could be whittled down to little more than an algorithm. So if this could be whittled down to an algorithm, it could be duplicated in a machine. So therefore, they could duplicate your consciousness in a machine, and you can live forever. That's the notion they want to go with. But here's the problem. This bypasses the idea of the ontological I am, or the ontological self. Who am I? Am I a spirit? Am I a soul? This bypasses that notion of things. So even though they may be able to create a very accurate facsimile of you in a machine, is that really going to be you existing there? Your consciousness existing there, your soul, your spirit existing there? And this notion brings up a lot of questions then. Well, if it's not, and it's a cheap knockoff, then what is this exactly? What is this notion of transhumanism? Well, and this is where it gets a little bit more speculative about this. So if that's the case, if you can't truly live forever transferring your consciousness into a machine, then what happens with that? Well, they make this facsimile of you that's very convincing for other people. So then people begin to believe, oh, this can be done. This is real. I know my relative. They went through this process and now they live forever in the machine. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and do it. So what is this actually? Well, it's a great culling process. It's a eugenics program. That's essentially what it is. And they've been talking about this eugenics depopulation plan for a long time. So that's one notion of thinking you could go with. Now, another one that's a little more frightening is if you do actually you are capable of somehow manifesting or transferring your spirit into a machine. Isn't that kind of like creating your own personal hell?
Yeah.
That's the other context of it you have to look at. So I explore these avenues of thought in my work and in my writing, and I think this is the ultimate fulfillment of their quote unquote great work. Now, this would be the twisted, dark occultists at the top of the power structure that are seeking these things and abusing some of these old natural sciences and alchemical sciences to get there, because they seek to be the gods of this place in no uncertain terms. They want absolute control of everything, and they want to be able to live forever. And they see that in their grasp now with modern technologies. So that's why
They
they're pushing.
they think they can,
They
right?
think they can. Yes, some of them very much are deluded and believe they can do this. And then I think there's another aspect of some of these dark controllers who know better, but still they want to take down as many souls as they can in the process.
And it's interesting, Wayne, because if you look at philosophies that are arising from the esoteric and from the alchemical, there is this idea of the perfectibility of man through just man's efforts, that you don't have to connect to the power who created you. And this is, of course, the technological endpoint of that. It is well, of course, in a way, we're all going to be golems. We will have our consciousness transferred into things made of silica, of metal, of different elements, and we will be perfected. And we can perfect ourselves through that way. There will be no disease or anything like that, and we'll live forever. And of course, that runs completely contrary to the very concept of Christianity, even Judeo-Christian tradition, which is that man was created by God, man is flawed, we have original sin, and the way that we get salvation is not through worldly changes necessarily, but through recognizing our creation and the commandments of God.
Oh, absolutely. But there are those within some of these occult fraternities that have taken some of the teachings and twisted them way out of context and
Yeah.
have contorted them as such. Now, you will have this leads down to a basic separation in philosophy. Okay.
Yeah.
There's two different groups of people in this world when you ask the occultists or those people in the secret society groups about this. There's who they call themselves the philosophers of fire. They are the sons of Cain, and they're the builders. They're the ones that get things done. Okay, you thought Granger had a great logo there or a great moniker, the ones that get things done. That's the builders. That's these people who belong to these secret fraternities. Okay, they see themselves as the sons of Cain. They're the philosophers of fire. They build their own way. They've taken a portion of scripture, twisted it and contorted it all out of context.
Mm.
And this is where man will have dominion over the earth. So they see man having dominion, meaning man can take control, he can reshape the earth, build it into whatever he wants, and he can do it better. He can become greater than God. And this ties back to the original lie in the Garden of Eden. You can be as gods. Well, that's what they believe. So they think they can build their own salvation. And they see the other side of this, those people, as being weak-willed and not being deserving of having this type of an elevation, a spiritual elevation of sorts. So the other side of this is whom they call those of the waters of faith, and those would be the godly sons of Seth. So those are the ones that are content with taking what God has given us here and utilizing that and being content with that, living off of nature, working with the natural principles, working within the natural order of things. Whereas the philosophers of fire, they work against or contrary to the natural order of things, and they want to build something wholly artificial or synthetic that they can be the gods of and have total control of. They truly believe they can build a better world than God. They can build a better man than God. And this is what they pursue, and they see this as their divine right to do so. And this ties back again to some old other occult principles and occult teachings of the mythological type that I don't know if you want to touch on that tonight. Honestly, I could talk for 12 hours about this.
It's just so fascinating. And you know, the thing that gets me, Wayne, is why they go through all of these things and make it so hard when it's so simple. You know, it's like the easiest way is to recognize what's manifestly around you. Just take a look, and you start to get it. You don't have to like, well, we're gonna worship this animal god or do this or this ritual thing over here. It's like, no, you don't have to do that. Just think it through. You know.
Well, that's the other side of it, and this is what I always try to teach all the time when I'm talking about this stuff, because what I do is I'll go and I'll find their own books, their own writings, and I'll tell you what it is that they believe in their own words, and then I will offer the biblical counterbalance to this. And Jesus Christ told us something specific. He told us that he would be a stumbling block for these people, and most certainly he is, because the simplicity of his divine salvation plan, it makes all of their work moot.
Yeah.
So they strive, they're grasping for the wind, as Solomon said in the book of Ecclesiastes. It's a grasping for wind. It's endless striving for this. It's man trying to earn his own salvation, trying to earn his own spiritual success, when God made a simple path for us, and it's a free gift, and all you have to do is accept the free gift, and that's that, man. It's simple. It's so simple that it causes a stumbling block for people. So you don't have to go through the whole process of joining a secret society, being initiated into their rites, swearing their blood oaths, learning all of their secrets that they teach you within this, learning all of the secret handshakes and all of the code words and everything else, and going through all this rigmarole and this magical training and learning all this stuff in order to build your own salvation. And at the end of it all, you still have nothing. You know nothing. It's a carrot they dangle before you all the time. More knowledge, more knowledge, more knowledge. You want to know the next secret? They dangle that carrot in front of you, make you believe they know something that you don't, and they keep you walking down the path they want you down. It's a control system, even within the secret society groups. This is how they operate, and that's how they keep you marching forward, thinking you're going to learn some grand secret nobody else knows. You'll achieve some type of a magical supernatural ability nobody else has, and it's all a lie. The real
Yeah.
secret behind it all is controlling people, and they're masters at it. They make you swear allegiance and blood oaths to uphold the secrets of their fraternity and not to tell them to any outsider. So this is one of the ways they do things. Secrecy is one of the greatest mind control secrets ever,
Yeah.
ever
And of
conceived.
course, if you
Ever
break their
used.
rules, you won't be part of that group that gets the gravy.
That's right. And a lot of people just join like a lot of these groups like the Masons because, well, it gives them better business dealings in the community. They could go down to the or the car dealership and get a square deal, wink,
Yeah.
wink, nudge. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
you're
It's so
traveling
weak.
man from east to west or west
Yeah.
to east.
Yeah, you
West.
make me think of the Great Monty Python skit, the Architect sketch, where they show the replay of the Masonic handshake, but they make it a goofy handshake and stuff. And they show, I love that. It's just hilarious. It's great stuff. Wayne, I know we're gonna have to close things off, but I would love to have you back whenever you're free. And I know you're very busy covering stuff, doing all your productions. Again, let's mention to people the new website. It's available, folks, at Alchemical Tech Revolution. We'll show it right there. And I love, where'd you get that artwork?
That's all made by me. So
Oh, that's amazing. That is just incredible. I might need to approach you for the cover for one of my books, especially this one about bats. We'll see. Oops, sorry, I put myself on there. Sorry about that. And Wayne, when can people hear you next live?
next live, probably Tuesday night on Rockfin. I'll be on live.
What time do you know?
Usually 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That seems to be the best time for me to do these things.
All right, man. I hope people will go to your website, check you out, get hooked in. They can become paid subscribers. They can donate per episode or whatever they want to do over on Rockfin as well, and pick up the books. I think that would be really, really cool. And I'd love to have you back whenever you might be free, even next week. If you want to come back, it'd be fantastic.
Yeah, man, hit me up. We'll arrange something. Sounds good.
All right.
Appreciate
All
it.
right, cool, man. Thanks. I'll get ready to wrap up the show and get some dinner going and stuff like that. And I will make no sacrifices for my food, but I will pray before I eat. Thanks, man.
Discover the amazing, clinically proven health benefits of original Tahitian noni. Original Tahitian noni includes powerful antioxidants, adaptogens, nutrients, and phytonutrients to naturally boost energy levels, immune system function, and overall health. Meticulously sourced from French Polynesia, this is the original superfruit, except no imitations. Original Tahitian noni. Visit ATR Health at alchemicaltechrevolution.com. and click on the Shop Here tab for more details.
But we can no longer risk emergency improvisation of national defense. We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.